had pitched his tent towards this. And so eventually he ends up in Sodom for lots of different reasons, but I would say one of those could have been this need for safety, security, because he's no longer within the realm and the space of the one who has been taking care of him for so long, his uncle Abraham. Okay? And there could be other things, but to your point, this fascinating study, we don't have time to go into it, it's fascinating study throughout the Bible, especially the Old Testament, where mountains are used and the sacredness of mountains and what they represent, the typology throughout them. Fascinating, especially when you consider the fact that that's where they're told to go by the Lord. And he's like, very similar to the way people read Sermon on the Mount, those things, and say, it's impossible. What? Right? They don't see the reality. Okay, so, and we could go on and on about that. So good. So look at verse 18. But Lot said to them, "No, my lords, please, your servant has found favor in your eyes, and you have shown great kindness to me." So he's aware of some things in sparing my life. "But I can't flee to the mountains. This disaster will overtake me, and I'll die. Look, here is a town near enough to run to, and it is small. Let me flee to it. It is very small, isn't it? Then my life will be spared." And so, okay, a catastrophe is about to strike, right? And Lot is arguing about the escape route.
One of the things I've always read this, it's funny because Abraham is called to leave.
Mm-hmm.
Go to a land that I'll show you.
Yeah.
I'll show you. Trust me, and faith in me.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's
It
a
is.
different situation here, but it is interesting that he puts a lot in the situation where Lot can choose
Mm-hmm.
to put his faith in God,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
but he just can't help
Yeah.
himself. He's
Yeah.
scared.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's obvious where his faith is.
Right.
It's not in God. It's in some level of city walls. Ultimately, he scraps all that and goes for a cave.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
He's just,
Yeah.
he refuses
Yeah.
to have ultimate faith in God.
Yeah. Man, I think that story being there is so powerful for us because there's so many elements of it I think that we could potentially see within ourselves. The tendencies, maybe even that we have. But when he's told, given the directive, he's like, I don't have time to make it. There's a lack of trust there, right? I don't have time to make it. And the moment to him fleeing to the mountains seemed overwhelming, I think. And so he asks to go to this small town. Think of it, and again, if I may, just spin a little, I don't know if you might want to call it a positive note on this, or just see ourselves in this. Look at this as maybe sometimes the small steps that we have to take to get where we want to be. Okay? That's what it reminds me of. Sometimes, that seems overwhelming, but eventually, understand, you don't get there overnight. It's going to take a few steps, right? I'm not saying apply that to this scenario, but it does when you think about our own journey and where we're headed, what we're trying to do, what we're trying to accomplish, or who we want, whatever it is, okay? What we're called to be. Just think of it, and as we get into the story here a little more, think of it as this is a small step. Small step, okay. And not much like, or not unlike ourselves, right? Things can seem overwhelming in the moment, right? Things can seem overwhelming in the moment when trying to come out of things, make changes. I've seen this over and over again, man, working with people who just could not see what you see. And the smallest thing just was overwhelmingly impossible. And just normal things that we deal with every day that come so easy to us, oftentimes for some people, it's just insurmountable barrier, right? At first, and they start taking small steps. Okay? And eventually, what seemed to be overwhelming and impossible, they begin to see as, oh, I can do this. It is a reality, okay? Even in the small steps. So eventually, as Scott alluded to, Lot actually leaves that small town and makes it to the mountain eventually. And verse 30, and that's why I say that. So The first step might seem to be the hardest, but once we make that step, transformation can begin, right? But what does it take? It's going to take surrender. It does. Stop striving for what you want, especially when what you want is not governed by a heart that is aligned with the heart of God, right? Okay. Verse 21, he said to them, very well. I love this. I will grant this request to you. I will not overthrow the town you speak of, but flee there quickly, because I cannot do anything until you reach it. That is why the town was called Zoar, which literally means little place. Okay? What I find interesting in this is that God meets Lot where he is. And it seems like he modifies his plans. Now, you want to get theologically and talk about, don't go there. Look at the narrative. God seems to modify his plans here to do so. This little town, verse 21, was going to be among those destroyed. Right? And now, verse 22 is going to wait until Lot makes it to the town before anything happens. And I think that this reflects how God meets us where we are as well, leading us in the small things, especially the small things. Man. We're always looking for the big stuff. Man, I think it's in the small things. It's in the small things. I think that's one of the important, man, I don't have time. It's in the small things, man. That's where it's at. It's where it's at. It's in the small things. It's in the valley too, not just the mountain, right? Yes, it's in the fire and in the tornadoes and all the other things that Elijah experienced. That's why he expected the Lord to appear. But it ends up being in the small voice. In the small things too. Let's not overlook that, okay? So this is a part of our faith journey as well. Right? Being able to look back and see how and why we continue to move forward. We can see, yeah, the Lord was in these small things. In these small things. In these small, I mean, we talk about it lots of, everybody uses different language. The longer I'm here, the more accustomed you'll be to the language that I use, like rhythms, right? That's a reality. But no matter how you talk about it, the reality is that if we take the New Testament seriously, for instance, just like when James says, if you lack wisdom, ask God. Well, how do you think God's going to give you that wisdom? Like you can, you got to understand, like we strive for that. We pray for that, but we strive for that like as if we didn't pray for it. I'm not saying we don't do something. I'm not saying we don't put effort, but it's in the process where a lot of the learning and the knowledge and the wisdom comes in. And it's not all up to us. But again, how do you think God's going to provide you that wisdom? How do you think it happens? Well, that's hard to articulate, right? But I think a big part of that is that we are relying upon something outside of ourselves. Where's our trust end up being, right? But you got to also understand that God is not just, that's not just an idea. There's a reality that is lived out in all of this, okay? And it's hard even for us to talk about it sometimes. Okay, so look at, oh man, okay. By the time Lot reached Zoar, the sun had risen over the land, and the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. Thus he overthrew those cities and the entire plain, destroying all those living in the cities and also the vegetation in the land. But Lot's wife looked back, and she became a pillar. It's the idea of something that is stationary, even like a military post, a garrison, a statue of salt. And this is interesting here. With this verse, I think a couple things are happening. Lot's wife actually becomes an example, okay? A witness that can be a catalyst, encouraging us to go out of the old self, to pursue the new self, and to not give up. And what happens as we look back? Because this is impossible, and we revert oftentimes back to what we're comfortable with, what we always know, right? But the interesting thing here is this pillar. Something stationary, a statue like a military post, a garrison. It's like a signpost, right? A reminder. But here's another interesting thing. I think that it can also be used as a catalyst, especially when we look at the New Testament. Man, I wish we had time to get into this. We will have time some other time. Sure, it'll come up again. Especially, salt in the New Testament, salt. You know, don't think salt, table salt, okay? Salt in the New Testament was a catalyst for starting fires. Believe that? Sodium chloride does not start fire. That helps put out fire, right? Is that the word? I think that's the chemical. I'm not a scientist. Anyways, but when you think of salt in the New Testament, there's this thing where Jesus talks about when salt has lost its flavoring. But don't think of flavoring like touch, but like taste, okay? You just think of the components there. It's not good for anything but to be thrown out. It may not even be good for the dung pile, but it's thrown out in the streets. We're talking about what they used to do is when they make their brick ovens, they would have a slab of salt, but don't, again, it's mixed with lots of different things. Magnesium was a big chemical in there. That they would make these, then they would make these patties, if you will, out of dung and other things to light their ovens. And they would put salt in there, and they would dry it out, and they would stick it on this salt brick, and that would be a catalyst when they would go to start the fire. And eventually, though, the salt brick would no longer work. What oftentimes would, I think what I understand is what made the salt brick a catalyst was the amount of magnesium that was in it, okay? And so as a result, when you think of the word salt in the New Testament, it's not just about its preserving qualities, although you can see how that would still be a part of maybe even the salt brick, right? Think of it as a catalyst, getting the fire going, okay? And when I look at this, and I look at Lot and his wife, serves as a catalyst along the way to help us keep on going and to not look back, okay? Fascinating stuff, especially when you consider culture and you consider how things were used. Just the multiple layers in which these stories present themselves and the things they teach us, and the more you sit, man, we could just sit here all day. Okay, sorry guys. Thank you for your comments. We are done. I just had to get that part in.